So in a previous video, we talked about 12 things to look out for when buying in an HOA or condo complex. One of those items that we said to watch out for was chronic issues in the complex. This video, we're going to talk a little bit more about that and dive a little more deeply into what that means. Chronic issues in an HOA or condo complex, maintenance-wise, have a lot to do with when the HOA was built and who was the builder. Every HOA or construction project for that matter has weaknesses in build quality. Not all of the subcontractors are equally as talented. There could be turnover with vendors from one project to the next. So there's always going to be weaknesses in any construction, any build. Find out what the chronic issues are with the property you're looking at first. If it's a brand new development, it might be that nobody knows yet. If it's older, it's likely that people will have figured out what the weaknesses are. Here's some examples of chronic issues we've come across that become quite costly in the long run. So the first example is a complex that was built in the 70s, and the whole place was built using the first generation of PEX plastic plumbing pipe. There's a tongue twister for you. Try to say that one 5 times fast. These pipes, these first generation of PEX piping, were eventually recalled and no longer used due to bad design. But they were used throughout that complex, eventually leading to chronic leaks and plumbing failures. The only way to permanently fix it is to open up all the walls and replace all the plumbing, and that is very, very expensive. And so the association has not done that, but it is something where if they want to permanently repair the problem, that's what they're gonna have to do. So yeah, big deal. The next complex or example that I have is another complex that was built in the 70s. And this is a different complex right down the street from the first one. This complex has aluminum wiring through the whole place, and the contractors used Pacific Electric boxes when they built it. Both aluminum wiring and Pacific Electric boxes have been recalled and are now known to be very bad, huge fire hazards. Therefore, the whole complex needs the entire electrical system to be replaced. This goes through a process called aluminum wire abatement. That is an incredibly expensive process. Again, similar to the piping, you got to open up all the walls, take out all the wiring, run all new electrical. It's a big deal. So now let's talk about a third complex. It's also built in the 1970s, and it's also right down the street from the first two we talked about. This complex, when they put the drywall up, the joint compound they use has 2% asbestos in the joint compound, which means that anytime there's a water leak or water loss that requires sheetrock to be removed, asbestos abatement is required. Asbestos abatement triples the cost of the job, which the insurance companies won't pay for because most insurance companies have asbestos exclusions. So now the association has to come out of pocket every time they have a loss because their whole place has asbestos in the joint compound. These are typical issues from that era, which are the 1970s. Now let's move to a complex built in the late 80s. This complex was built in 1988, and all their mechanical closets were poorly designed and poorly insulated. The engineer designed the complex so that everybody's mechanical closet was on an exterior wall. And the mechanical closets have their water heaters, it has their furnaces, it has their main water piping and all that stuff. So what happens is every time the temperatures drop below 10 degrees, which is a few times a year in this area, it's in Connecticut, you get a bunch of burst pipes and water losses. It's because of where the mechanical closet was located and the poor insulation that was used in that complex. The only permanent fix is to redo the whole siding and re-insulate the building and rewrap the whole complex, which will cost millions of dollars. The association is about to bite that bullet for a number of reasons, not just this one, but again, big issue with a huge price tag to correct it. Now, new developments are not immune to this either. We have a luxury condo complex that was built around 2010, and it was never built to the original spec because the developer ran out of money and went bankrupt. This is common. It's more common than you think. So what happens is the result of the developer going bankrupt or running out of money halfway through the build is that they cut corners all over the place. And that is common. It's common for developers to run out of money. It's common for them to start cutting corners when they're in the process of running out of money. So what happened because of them cutting corners? One is chronic roof leaks. The roofs were done poorly, so all the roofs are having chronic leaks at this point. Also, the common stairwells, so each building has a central stairwell, they ran out of money, so they just chose not to put the walls up around the stairwell. They left it open. Now, that might work in Florida, but in Connecticut, that's a problem. So every time it would rain or weather would come through, it would damage sheetrock because they used interior spec materials for these stairwells because they were designed to be inside. And it would make the floors incredibly slippery because, again, it was interior grade tile. And then when the temps would drop to, super cold, the fire suppression systems, the sprinklers that they had running through there, again, because it's designed to be enclosed, those fire suppression systems would freeze, leading to catastrophic water losses. This led to huge insurance losses and a multi-year lawsuit with the developer that made it nearly impossible for people to sell their units for a period of time while that lawsuit was going on. So that finally settled and they were able to get the money to close in their stairwells and make some of the repairs that are needed. But again, the complex is only 14 years old and they're just finding more and more ways where the developer cut costs and cut corners. And now we have a development that is currently being built. It's currently under development. It's a beautiful complex. The builder is fantastic. However, they sourced their toilets, the toilets for all these houses, beautiful luxury home complex. All the toilets had a design flaw where they used a plastic fitting for the water supply line. It was during COVID that these were manufactured and probably quality control went down the tubes. And for whatever reason, these plastic fittings where the supply line connects to started failing within like a year of installation. So the developer had to go and basically replace all the toilets or replace that fitting. I'm not sure what he did, but fortunately, this manufacturing error, this issue, this weakness was discovered while the developer was still on site doing the construction, so he was able to fix it in kind of one sweeping process. However, that's not always the case. So sometimes it's not the builder or the developer, it's just a manufacturing flaw, a manufacturing defect in the materials that were used. Similar to the asbestos and the PEX piping and all that stuff, right? In the 70s, that was okay, or it seemed like it was okay, and then 10 years later, you find out it's a problem. So that's something to keep an eye out for. New developments are not immune to it. And sometimes, the developer sells off the last of the properties and then 5 years later, this design flaw creeps up and rears its ugly head. So this is just to let you know, keep an eye out for those things. Every complex or HOA development is gonna have a design flaw or a mechanical weakness of some sort. Your job is just figure out what those are before you buy it and figure out if you're willing to live with it or not. So all the examples that I used in this video are actually within a 10-mile radius of each other and a 10-mile radius of where we operate. The point is, it's super, super common. It's not like these are one-offs all around the country. It's all in a 10-mile radius, every single example that I just gave you. So go back to the basics, right? Do your research, find out when it was built, what are the typical construction quality issues from that era, and if possible, what are the chronic issues of the development you're looking into at this moment. Again, my name is Jared, the HOA Crusader. Like, subscribe, leave a comment if you felt this was useful or helpful, or if you've got a horror story of your own with design issues or construction issues, and we hope to see you in the next video.